Kia ora koutou katoa, it's Mrs. Goodson here, and this video is about how blood travels around the body. So in earlier videos, we learnt that every single cell in our body needs oxygen to carry out respiration, because that's how our cells turn glucose into energy, or how to access that energy in the glucose. So all of our cells need oxygen, and it's the blood, the red blood cells, that carry the oxygen. So, how does that blood travel around our bodies? So, all of our blood is actually in little tubes. So, the biggest tubes, or the ones with the thickest walls, are called arteries. And the arteries have to have thick walls because they carry blood away from the heart. So, the heart is pumping. So, the arteries have tough, flexible, thick walls, and they're the largest blood vessels. And the artery coming straight from our heart is known as the aorta. And then it branches off into small arteries, smaller and smaller and smaller, until the arteries branch down into capillaries. Now, capillaries are actually really, really small blood vessels, and they are there's a network of capillaries, and they are right next to the cell. So they are the smallest blood vessels, and they're only one cell thick. And so what happens is that the oxygen can pass through the walls of the capillaries into our cells, and the oxygen goes into the cell, and any waste comes out of the cell into our blood. So, and then the capillaries join up with our veins. Okay, veins don't need to have those thicker walls as arteries because the blood pressure is less in your veins, and it carries the blood back to the heart. So we think veins go into the heart. Vein, see how it's got the word in it? That's a way to remember veins. And they're kind of our medium sized blood vessels. So we've got arteries, veins, and capillaries are the different kinds of blood vessels that carry our blood. So the system that carries our blood is known as the circulatory system. And so that includes our heart. The heart is the pump for the system. And then, so the blood travels to the lungs. Okay, so we've got our lungs here, our left lung and our right lung, and then it travels back to the heart. So at the lungs, the carbon dioxide goes out of our body, and the oxygen goes into our body and goes into our blood. It goes back to our heart, and then it's going to pump out of our heart, out of the aorta, which is our biggest artery. It's going to come out of our aorta and into the system that gets smaller and smaller and smaller to the capillaries. So the capillaries are right next to the cells, so the oxygen can go into the cells, the carbon dioxide and other waste can come out, and then it comes out of the capillaries into our veins, back into our heart so that it can be pumped back to our lungs, back to our heart, back to our body cells, and these two circuits just continue going around. And so that's how blood travels around our body. So just to review that, so the blood carries oxygen to all of our cells. The oxygen is brought into our bodies by our lungs, and carbon dioxide is removed. Then it travels back to the heart. From the heart is pumped out into the arteries and onto the capillaries to every cell in the body. Oxygen is transferred from the capillary to the cell. Inside that cell, that's a very important process called respiration occurs and makes carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is transferred into the blood and carried back out to the heart and lungs, and that cycle continues. So this video has been about naming the body system. So that's the circulatory system that carries blood around the body. Naming the main parts of the circulatory system, including the different kinds of blood vessels, and describing the pathway of blood around the body. And so that pathway explains how the blood provides oxygen to the cells and what happens at each stage of the journey.